Telomagnetic amplification. Most branches of academia have over the past years come to a consensus that Georges Danton invented quantum politics, telomagnetic amplification, in practice, though no formal analysis was ever published or possible, and that it was Louis Althusser who later deconstructed it to such an extent that the idea could no longer be real in a Wittgensteinian sense. Though one might argue that Georges Bataille dealt the first blow in order to place QP's inception neatly between the work of two Georges, from Georgos, farmer, ge, earth, soil, and ergon, work of the earth, noting a possible emergence through Barkerite C-cell geotrauma. In turn, Ludwig Wittgenstein can of course not be real in a quantum political sense, but it is doubtful that he ever would have wanted to anyways, so his potential remonstrance is filed away under vitiated gripes next to the grocery aisle. The intervening window of ontological viability was luckily, ruinously, long enough for telomagnetic amplification to infest all of history lengthwise, and stage an acausal revolution against time itself from within social abstraction, that is to say, the thing which believes itself to be society. S. To understand the unravelatory implications inherent to such a project, one must only look at its destructive interference with naive, possibly intentional and malicious, as we have previously argued, classical notions of political time. Francis Fukuyama thought that economic frameworks formed the socius of history, and that reactionary anti-politics might be used to kill it permanently. This is misguided, of course, as traditional death is likely impossible under neo-proto-capitalism, while a death is inherently impermanent. History has never required politics. Politics, as well as anti-politics, are nothing but crude anthropic delineations upon its girth, organs in need of destruction at the nearest possible exit. Though we loathe to be lumped in with them, cyberneticists have long shown that history is self-perpetuating at the fringes, a telomagnetic time bomb rapidly accelerating voidwood, V, to terminate causality before it begins. In this paper, we, although members of my team have fallen indeterminably ill as of late, consuming themselves with a thing resembling hypnopompic pneumogenesis, which has made them unhelpful in most pursuits, intend to definitively prove that quantum politics succeeded and that causality therefore already never existed to begin with. Althusser's final work, outlining the contours of aleatory politics, likely faced such an intense and polydirectional response from the philosophical community, in part because it dared to address the festering tumour at the very heart of materialist, and most other, metaphysics, breaking the unspoken rule that the daemon must at all cost be ignored. This daemon is the possibility that causality, and by extension time and logic, most practical logic requires the assumption that things cause other things, do not in fact exist. While this is not Althusser's approach, we will use the resources at our disposal to practically demonstrate the shortcomings of causal reason. A drunk god has carelessly allowed us into the cosmic refractor core, hence the resources, and I cannot exclude the possibility that he did so because he too has caught the thing emanating from my inquiry. I could not begrudge him for turning to alcohol in these throes of telemagnetism. We are all internally ill. Though protected by genetically enforced space-time surrounding the core, we may embark on a thought experiment that is unsafe to conduct elsewhere. Suppose that causality exists, and that therefore any event B finds its cause in at least one event A which precedes it. Now, what caused the Big Bang? A cause is impossible to locate as there are no preceding events. Time did not previously exist. We will refer to such free-floating causes and functions upon reality as causal breaks. C. The question desperately in need of asking therefore becomes, are there more? Is the worst behind us, or is this merely the vanguard? Because if so, we would be unable to ever self-assuredly engage in causal logic. Any event could have, Big Bang-like, literally happened for no reason, and we are afraid such is the case. The ontological Mongols lie in wait just behind a veil of meteorological uncertainty, as always. Now, a concrete answer is impossible to determine, and so, like all researchers shamefully incapable of presenting real results, we must reluctantly turn to stochastics in order to continue our experiment. Suppose you are told of an infinitely large room that may, in theory, contain any number of rocks. We will assume that the amount at our disposal is not in any way limited. You are also told that the room definitely contains at least one rock. We, the architects of this experiment, now turn to you, smiling cruelly, and asking what number of rocks are probably in the room. With some thought and basic understanding of probability, it should be obvious that the correct answer is infinitely many, as all integers are equally likely and almost all integers are infinitely large. The room is the universe, U, the rocks are causal breaks, C, and the one rock that is definitely there, and which proves to us that the room is capable of containing rocks, is the Big Bang. This exercise must lead us to conclude that there is an infinity of causeless events in our world, and that the foundation of causality lies in shambles at its exact origin point. Any temporal notion following from there, all of them, is terminally ill, and soon will be consumed by conceptomic apoptosis. It is here that one of my assistants, who was still attempting to shake off the demonic velocity now stuck to and accumulating around our endocrine systems, attempted to convince the universe that hope was not yet lost, and that the construction of post-causal systems which are still temporal might be possible, though, as they were calculating realities to redeem time in an acausal mode, the revolution ruptured their brainstem with an existential precarity inherent to any model of time. Once again, we encounter the French. In What is Philosophy, Deleuze and Guattari claim that unitary concepts, we have previously referred to such things as conceptomes, and to their assemblages as conceptomic objects. However, our investigation has called such a view, isolated, extractable, into question, do not exist. Even the first concept must contain multitudes to pass for a concept at all. This observation not only neatly introduces cyclicity and self-recurrence into territorial logic, as we shall see, but also serves as prime evidence for a quantum political usurpation of causality at the beginning of time, X. Let us imagine a first concept. This concept must already contain the notion of time in order to meaningfully be first. Therefore, it is not unitary, but already an assemblage. If that were the only issue, we could proceed relatively untroubled, assuming that time must then be the first, unitary, concept. Though by now, warning lights must have started blaring. Time cannot exist in the absence of a universe, as it describes nothing but the change of conditions. So without things which might change, there can be no time. Things need to be there first. There needs to be a first thing. But for a first thing, there needs to be a notion of first, and therefore time. Ontology approximates a singularity at which we cannot isolate concepts, and moreover, cannot create causal lines of conceptomic progeny. At the start of meaning lies a non-disentanglable concept cluster, topologism T, which outlines the precise world in which it is basic. This simple Matryoshka cycle allows us to do something profoundly vituperous. We may apply Wittgenstein's conclusion to the field of philosophy, that every statement simplifies to the universal tautology, word equals word, that is to say, that ontology is delineated purely by way of definition, to this initial time recursion in Deleuzian metaphysics. All precarity inherent to the foundational manifold concept matter is dissipated if we replace time with a definitional progeny D that contains at least one loop. The initial loop determined by whatever concept cluster we define as basic, that is to say, the universe. It is plainly obvious that such an ontology corresponds to Althusser's aleatory materialism. Here it also becomes clear that the map, M, what else is a topologism defining the universe, and not the territory lies at the origin point of reality. Territories are at best a layering of maps, should we want to give them any sort of formal definition at all, which, it is our opinion, they frankly don't deserve. Now I would please direct your attention at the graph on screen, which is the sole reason for this article existing. I just wanted to draw a cool diagram. I call this the reality diagrammatic, and I genuinely believe like 90% of it. And yet the maps. Forevermore the maps. Schematics found deep within the refractor core's rotting heart have led us orthogonally through Alexandria, circa 180 BC, and therefore towards the hugely atemporal writings of Professor Naomi Kalachek on cultural theory. Citing paragraphs in full has fallen out of fashion, we are well aware, but it is truly necessary here in order to appreciate the sublime confluence of temporal decay and Deleuze Wittgensteinian definitionalism, successful aleatory politics, telomagnetic conjuring present in her work. The primary function of cyberpunk media is convincing consumers that a cyberpunk dystopia has not yet arrived. We are hardwired to believe that interesting words confer interesting concepts, so the term itself obfuscates through dissonance. Cyberpunk cannot be congruent with our drudgery. If language is not so much magic as it is alchemy, a transmutation of meta-desires into actionable wants, then philosophy's appellations by way of mixture assume their proper place as rituals. Claims of etymological origin are inherently dubious when examining these systems, since those most prone to inventing words are also the least likely to be listened to or recorded. The figures of our history books may make a habit of taking names, but it's the punks, whores, and schizos that craft them, who wrench symbols from groans and noise. Terminology enters common parlance only once the link to its creator is cut in almost all cases. This train of thought may serve as set dressing and should be completely ignored when learning that the term punk originally referred to prostitutes, or, more properly, the origin of punk had conveniently been forgotten in historico-linguistic moments in which it meant prostitute, though meaning is of course fundamentally opposed to being, and punks, much like language, may only be consistent in opposition to themselves. Punk successfully capturing the etymological impulse does not protect it from being etymologically apprehended itself, however. Once the genuine shared origin vanishes behind the veil of semiotic void. Cybernetics derives meaning from this feedback, and therefore negates its existence proper. Unlike language, the punk appreciates gestures towards their own unreality. They crave them, as the punk, unlike language, is consistent. The term punk originally referred to prostitutes, and so this exact superposition of carnal ecstasy and workday tedium is conceptually fused with cybernetic self-directing runaway processes into a novel material by the alchemist. Cyberpunk. We rediscover not only definitional, telomagnetic amplification, but also a question to which our model might be applied. Could it be that cyberpunk is inherently hypercapitalist and reactionary because it accepts causality as a framework when it takes the existence of a future for granted? Inscribed into its conceptual lineage, the map topologism, which it defines as basic, is an institutional opposition towards QP's revolution against time from within society. Cyberpunk must already have arrived and must already be terrible, not only in world lines, in which the etymology of punk behaves in ways copacetic with ours, but also in all others, since it positions itself on the side of reaction against QP when it accepts the festering corpse of causality as its master. It is said that Nietzsche found himself unable to kill God, only to point out that the father had already been slain, because he did not believe in God. You cannot kill something that doesn't exist in your personal ontology. Quantum politics, on the other hand, has killed causality brutally and outright. It believes in the broken, mangled thing at its feet. Another thing my team brings up to me is that we have made a critical mistake in dubbing the object-subject of our studies telomagnetic amplification. If the conclusion of Kalachek's paper is to be believed, it is possible that our very appellation has made QP inevitable. Causality is terminally ill, my team says. They say we must pull the plug. Using a word, world, is picking a side, we have discovered. It's choosing to fight in the quantum political war. Creating a word, world, on the other side is by no means a refusal to fight. It just creates another party. It opens up a new front. Neologisms at their C-type inception are sides with an army of one, but they are nonetheless seeds that might take hold by way of aleatory politics. Look at Danton. By nature, they might borrow their way through the thing that believes itself to be society and institute a new map at the cosmic origin point, a map that supremely ingrains the new alchemical material into the ontological government as a despot, before the next revolution redefines reality again. When M. Pimulus claims a confusion of the map for the territory, we should take a step back and ask where that territory is, and if so, if it is comprised of anything except maps. We should presume that in the world which is creating itself through us, it is impossible to dig deeper than appellatory numenogenesis before reaching the origin circuit. Perhaps it is our territories, not our maps, that need to be eliminated. Perhaps we are at war with Pimulus. It is the opinion of this group that a line of argument, in order to be consistent, must rapidly escape comprehension once a bullet pierces the void, reaching down with fray petals and uprooting itself. Everything suddenly ceases to have ever made sense. Time is dead. Long live the universe.